A waitress ignored a veteran single dad's order, humiliating him in front of his little girl until his Ranger tab was revealed. The manager fired her instantly, and what happened next uncovered a town's darkest secret. But will mercy or hate decide their future? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the factory parking lot as Jack Turner trudged toward his old pickup truck. His shoulders ached from 12 hours of lifting and moving heavy equipment, but he managed a small smile, thinking about seeing Lily. The factory work wasn't glamorous, but it put food on the table and kept a roof over their heads. He flexed his calloused hands as he climbed into the driver's seat, the familiar creak of the door a reminder that the truck, like him, had seen better days. The engine sputtered to life on the second try, and Jack headed across town to Mrs. Peterson's house, where Lily spent her afternoons after school. The streets of their small town were quiet at this hour, most shops already closing for the day. Jack caught his reflection in the rearview mirror, his dark skin weathered from years of service, touches of gray starting to show at his temples despite being only 35. The army jacket he still wore had faded from its original crisp green to a tired olive, but he kept it because it was warm and familiar, like an old friend. Pulling up to Mrs. Peterson's modest white house, Jack barely had time to put the truck in park before the screen door flew open. Lily burst out, her backpack bouncing against her back, her braids swinging with each step. The sight of her always made his heart lighter, no matter how exhausting the day had been. "Daddy!" Lily called out, running down the front path. Her smile was bright enough to chase away the gathering dusk. Jack stepped out of the truck and caught her in a bear hug, lifting her off her feet. "There's my girl. How was school today, sweetheart?" Mrs. Peterson appeared in the doorway, her kind face creased with a gentle smile. "She was an angel as always, Mr. Turner. Did all her homework, too." "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson," Jack called out, setting Lily down carefully. "Same time tomorrow?" The elderly woman nodded, waving as Jack helped Lily into the passenger seat. He made sure her seatbelt was secure before closing the door and walking around to the driver's side. Once they were moving, Lily's words tumbled out in excited bursts. "Daddy, guess what? In art class today, we made paper flowers, and Miss Roberts said mine were the prettiest. And at recess, I learned a new jump rope song. Want to hear it?" Jack glanced at her, drinking in her enthusiasm. Her brown eyes sparkled with joy, so much like her mother's had. "Of course I want to hear it, baby. But first, I've got a surprise for you." Lily bounced in her seat. "What kind of surprise?" "Well," Jack said, making a show of considering it carefully, "I was thinking maybe we could have dinner out tonight, at the diner." "Really?" Lily's eyes went wide. "The one with the spinning stools at the counter?" Jack nodded, his heart warming at her excitement. "That's the one. It's been a while since we had a daddy-daughter date night, hasn't it?" "Forever and ever," Lily declared, though it had only been a few weeks. She launched into a detailed account of her day, her voice filling the truck cab with stories about spelling tests and playground adventures. "And then Tommy said girls can't be scientists, but I told him that's not true because we learned about Marie Curie last week, and she discovered radioactivity." Lily pronounced the word carefully, clearly proud of remembering it. "That's right," Jack said, pride swelling in his chest. "You can be anything you want to be, Lily girl. Don't let anyone tell you different." They drove past the town square, where the old courthouse stood sentinel against the darkening sky. Jack's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel as they passed the group of men who always seemed to be loitering there, but he kept his expression neutral for Lily's sake. "Daddy," Lily said suddenly, her voice taking on that serious tone that sometimes made her sound older than her 7 years. "Why do you still wear your army jacket?" Jack thought about it for a moment. "Well, partly because it's warm and comfortable, but also because it reminds me of important things. About being brave. About doing what's right, even when it's hard." Lily nodded solemnly. "Like when Mommy got sick?" "Yeah, baby. Like then." Jack swallowed hard, keeping his eyes on the road. "Your mom was the bravest person I ever knew. Braver than the soldiers you worked with? Different kind of brave," Jack explained, turning onto Main Street. "There's the brave that makes you run into danger to help others, like in the army. But there's also the brave that helps you keep smiling and loving even when things are really tough. Your mom had both kinds." Lily was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then she reached over and patted his arm. You have both kinds too, Daddy. Jack had to blink hard a few times before he could respond. Thank you, sweetheart. The neon sign of the diner came into view, its cheerful glow a beacon in the growing darkness. Jack pulled into the small parking lot, finding a spot near the entrance. The windows were bright with warmth and light, and he could see a few other customers inside, seated in the red vinyl booths. Remember what we always say before we go somewhere new? Jack asked as he helped Lily out of the truck. Head up, heart strong, Lily recited, straightening her shoulders like a little soldier. That's right. Jack took her small hand in his, marveling as always at how perfectly it fit there. Ready for our adventure? Lily nodded eagerly, and together they walked toward the diner's entrance. Jack's work boots scuffed against the concrete, and his army jacket caught the cool evening breeze. He opened the door, the bell above it chiming their arrival, and led Lily inside, hoping for nothing more than a quiet meal with his daughter. A simple pleasure that meant everything to him. The bell above the diner's door chimed as Jack and Lily stepped inside. Warm air carrying the scent of coffee and grilled burgers enveloped them, a welcome change from the chilly evening outside. The place buzzed with the usual dinner crowd, families sharing meals, elderly couples in their regular booths, and teenagers clustered around the jukebox in the corner. Lily's small hand tightened around Jack's fingers as they waited by the "Please wait to be seated" sign. Her eyes widened at the sight of a massive chocolate cake, rotating slowly in a glass display case nearby. Look, Daddy, she whispered, pointing with her free hand. Can we get dessert too? Jack glanced down at his daughter, taking in her hopeful expression. The factory overtime would cover a little splurge. We'll see, sweetheart. Let's get dinner first, okay? A young waitress with blonde hair pulled back in a high ponytail bustled past them, carrying plates heaped with steaming food. She flashed a bright smile at an elderly couple seated near the window, setting their meals down with a flourish. There you go, Mr. and Mrs. Davidson. Your usual, just the way you like it. Can I get you anything else? The couple thanked her warmly, and she turned, finally noticing Jack and Lily. Her smile faltered as her gaze traveled from Jack's worn boots up to his faded army jacket. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she grabbed 2 sticky menus from the holder without making eye contact. Follow me, she said curtly, leading them to a table near the kitchen door, despite several empty booths by the windows. The constant swinging of the kitchen door would make conversation difficult, and the harsh fluorescent light overhead buzzed intermittently. Jack helped Lily into her seat before sliding into his own. The vinyl booth covering was cracked, with stuffing peeking through in places. He'd eaten at worse spots during his deployments, but Lily deserved better. Still, he kept his expression neutral, not wanting her to see his disappointment. The waitress, her name tag read Jenny, slapped the menus down on the table. Specials are on the board, she said, jerking her thumb toward a chalkboard on the far wall, too distant to read from their spot. Without waiting for a response, she spun on her heel and walked away. Why is she mad, Daddy? Lily asked in a small voice, her fingers fidgeting with the corner of her menu. Jack reached across the table and gave her hand a gentle squeeze. She's probably just having a rough day, baby. Let's see what looks good for dinner, okay? They studied their menus, Lily sounding out the longer words carefully. She'd been working hard on her reading, and Jack's chest swelled with pride as she managed spaghetti and meatballs without help. When Jenny passed their table again, Jack tried to catch her eye, but she determinedly looked the other way. A family of 4 came in and was seated at one of the window booths. Jenny immediately appeared at their table, all smiles again, pulling out a notepad. Welcome to May's Diner. Can I start you folks off with some drinks? Jack watched as she chatted easily with them, laughing at the father's jokes and complimenting the children's matching outfits. His jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady as he helped Lily narrow down her choices between chicken fingers and a grilled cheese sandwich. More customers arrived, a young couple, then another family. Jenny seated them all promptly, took their drink orders, and returned quickly with their beverages. Meanwhile, the water glasses at Jack and Lily's table remained empty, their order untaken. Lily's stomach growled audibly. She pressed her hands against it, looking embarrassed. Daddy, I'm really hungry, she whispered. I know, sweetheart. We'll get something soon. Jack raised his hand, trying once more to get Jenny's attention. She walked past their table for the 4th time, this time carrying a tray of milkshakes to the family by the window. The minutes ticked by. Lily's shoulders slumped as she watched other children enjoying their meals. She folded her paper placemat into smaller and smaller squares, then began drawing sad faces in the corners with the crayon she'd brought from her backpack. Jack's military training had taught him patience in the face of adversity, but watching his daughter's spirit dim with each passing moment tested his resolve. He could handle being ignored himself, it wouldn't be the first time, but Lily's hurt expression made his chest ache. Jenny breezed by again, this time pausing at the table next to theirs to chat with a couple who had arrived well after them. She laughed loudly at something they said, then pulled out her notepad. "What can I get for you folks tonight?" Jack's fingers curled into fists under the table, his knuckles whitening. He forced them to relax, one finger at a time. Getting angry wouldn't help the situation. He'd learned long ago that showing anything but calm dignity in these moments only made things worse, especially with Lily watching. "Maybe we should go somewhere else," Lily suggested quietly, her crayon stilling on the paper. "I don't think she likes us very much." The simple truth in his daughter's words made Jack's throat tight. He'd faced enemy fire without flinching, but nothing hurt quite like watching his child learn these harsh lessons about the world. He wanted to shield her from this, to keep her innocent a little longer. But the reality was already seeping in through the cracks. The smell of fresh fries wafted past as Jenny delivered another order to a nearby table. Lily's stomach growled again, and she hunched her shoulders, trying to make herself smaller in her seat. Jack clenched his jaw, maintaining his composure even as anger and helplessness battled inside him. They'd wait a few more minutes, he decided. Just a few more minutes before finding somewhere else to eat. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Jack and Lily sat in their red vinyl booth. The menu boards behind the counter listed daily specials in cheerful chalk letters, but the atmosphere around their table felt anything but welcoming. Other families chatted and laughed, their conversations creating a steady backdrop of warmth that seemed to skip over their corner entirely. Jack cleared his throat softly, trying to catch the waitress's eye as she passed their table for the third time. His calloused fingers drummed quietly on the laminated menu. "Excuse me, miss, when you have a moment." The waitress turned, her ponytail swinging, and fixed him with a cold stare. Her name tag read, Jenny. "Yeah? We've been waiting to order for about 15 minutes now." Jack kept his voice gentle, the same tone he'd used to calm nervous soldiers before missions. "My daughter's getting pretty hungry." Lily sat up straighter in her seat, her small hands folded neatly on the table just like her father had taught her. Her empty paper placemat was covered in careful crayon drawings of hearts and flowers. Jenny's lip curled as she looked at Jack's worn factory uniform, and the old army jacket hung carefully on the hook beside their booth. "People like you always expect handouts." The words hung in the air like smoke. Jack felt his shoulders tense, but he kept his expression neutral, the way he'd learned through years of facing prejudice with dignity. "Ma'am, we're not looking for handouts. We'd just like to order dinner." "I can pay." "Sure you can." Jenny's voice dripped with sarcasm. She turned to serve another table, making a show of refilling their water glasses and asking about their meal with exaggerated cheerfulness. Lily's lower lip trembled. "Daddy, why is she being mean?" Jack reached across the table and squeezed his daughter's small hand. "Some people just have bad days, sweetheart. It's not about us." But Lily was too perceptive for her age. She'd seen this before. The sideways glances, the whispered comments, the way some people's smiles never quite reached their eyes when they looked at her father. Is it because we're different? Jack's heart clenched. He watched as Jenny deliberately served 2 more tables that had arrived after them, bringing them steaming plates of food while pointedly ignoring their booth. Other diners were starting to notice, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats, others pretending not to see. "Different isn't bad, Lily Flower," Jack said softly, using his special nickname for her. "Remember what we talked about? What matters is who we are inside." Lily nodded, but her eyes were fixed on a family across the aisle, a mother, father, and 2 children about her age. They were all laughing together, sharing a plate of golden French fries. Jack saw the longing in his daughter's gaze and felt the familiar ache of guilt. She deserved better than this. Jenny passed their table again, this time dropping a stack of dirty dishes with a loud clatter that made Lily jump. "If you're not ordering, you need to leave. We've got paying customers waiting." Jack felt heat rise in his chest. Not anger, but a deep, weary sadness. He'd faced down enemy fire without flinching, led men through desperate situations, But these small cruelties in front of his daughter cut deeper than any wound he'd received in combat. "We'd like to order," he said quietly, still maintaining his composure. "Please." "Oh, now you're ready?" Jenny rolled her eyes. "Let me guess. You'll want the cheapest thing on the menu? Or maybe you're expecting a military discount?" Several nearby conversations stopped. The diner grew quieter, the uncomfortable silence spreading like spilled coffee across linoleum. Jack's hands trembled slightly as he folded the menu, but his voice remained steady. "No discount. I'd like the grilled chicken sandwich, and my daughter would like the junior cheeseburger, both with fries, please." Jenny snorted. "Right. And I suppose you'll want separate checks too, so you can expense it to the government or whatever?" Lily's eyes filled with tears. She'd seen her father face moments like this before, at the grocery store, at school functions, even at church. Each time, he met unkindness with quiet dignity. But she could see the hurt he tried to hide. "Just one check," Jack said. He pulled out his wallet, removed two $20 bills, and placed them on the table. "This should cover it, including tip." Jenny stared at the money, her expression flickering between surprise and something else, perhaps shame, though it quickly hardened back into contempt. "Well, isn't that generous? Must be nice having all that combat pay to throw around." Jack's jaw tightened, but he kept his eyes on Lily, trying to shield her from the hostility radiating from the waitress. His daughter's face crumpled as she watched a single tear escape down her father's cheek, despite his best efforts to hold it back. "Daddy, please don't cry," Lily whispered, her voice small and broken. The other customers turned to look, the sound of silverware against plates falling silent as all eyes focused on their booth. Jack quickly wiped his face with the back of his hand, but it was too late. Lily had seen, and so had everyone else. The diner's harsh lighting cast shadows across Jack's face as he leaned down toward his daughter. His weathered hands, calloused from years of factory work and military service, gently wiped a tear from Lily's cheek. The gesture was tender, practiced, the motion of a father who had dried many tears before. "It's okay, sweetheart," Jack whispered, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. "Sometimes people just have bad days." He adjusted his position to better shield Lily from the stares of other customers, his old army jacket pulling tight across his shoulders. As he moved, the fabric shifted, revealing a small but distinctive patch near his shoulder, the black and gold tab that marked him as an Army Ranger. It was worn but still clearly visible, a reminder of another life, another time. Across the diner, Mr. Harris stood behind the counter, automatically wiping down the surface with practiced strokes while observing his domain. He was a tall man with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed little. Those eyes, now fixed on Jack's shoulder, zeroing in on the revealed tab with laser focus. Mr. Harris's expression transformed. The professional mask of a restaurant manager fell away, replaced by something raw and personal. His hand froze mid-wipe, the cloth forgotten. Years seemed to fall from his face as recognition dawned, followed quickly by understanding and then anger. The waitress chose that moment to pass by Jack and Lily's table again, deliberately averting her eyes as she carried plates to other customers. "I'll get to you when I get to you," she muttered, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Mr. Harris's face flushed red. He dropped his cleaning cloth and moved with purposeful strides across the diner floor, his shoes clicking against the tiles. Other conversations began to die down as people sensed the tension building in the air. "Sarah!" Mr. Harris's voice cut through the remaining chatter like a knife. The waitress turned, startled by his tone. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" "I'm serving customers," she replied, gesturing to her full tray. "The regulars come first. That's what." "That man," Mr. Harris interrupted, pointing to Jack, "is wearing a Ranger tab. Do you have any idea what that means?" His voice trembled with barely contained emotion. "Do you know what someone has to do to earn that?" The waitress shifted uncomfortably, her confident demeanor cracking. "Look, Mr. Harris, No. You look." Mr. Harris stepped closer, his voice dropping lower but no less intense. "My son is alive today because of men like him. Rangers pulled him out of a firefight when nobody else could reach him. And you're treating this soldier, this father, like he's nothing?" The diner had gone completely silent now. Even the cooks in the kitchen had stopped to watch through the service window. Lily pressed closer to her father's side, her eyes wide as she watched the scene unfold. Jack started to speak. Sir, it's really not. It is necessary. Mr. Harris cut in firmly, though his tone was respectful. He turned back to the waitress, who had gone pale. Sarah, I've watched you treat customers poorly before, but this? He shook his head. This crosses a line I can't ignore. You're fired. Right now. Leave your apron and go. The waitress's mouth opened and closed several times before she found her voice. You can't. I can and I am. Mister, Harris's tone left no room for argument. This is my diner, and I won't have anyone working here who shows such disrespect to a ranger, to any veteran, or to their child. Sarah yanked off her apron, threw it on a nearby table, and stormed toward the door. The bell above it jangled angrily as she pushed through and disappeared into the night. Mr. Harris watched her go, then turned to Jack and Lily. His entire demeanor changed as he approached their table, softening from rigid authority to genuine warmth. He pulled out his order pad with a steady hand that belied his emotional state. Sir, he said to Jack, his voice thick with respect, I apologize for how you and your daughter were treated in my establishment. I'd be honored to take your order personally. He smiled down at Lily, who was watching him with curious eyes. And I know we make the best chocolate milkshakes in town if you're interested, young lady. Jack sat straighter, surprised by the sudden turn of events, but maintaining his composure. That's very kind of you, sir, but… Please, Mr. Harris interrupted gently. Let me do this. It's the least I can do. His eyes flickered to the Ranger tab again, and something passed between the two men, an understanding that went beyond words. Mr. Harris stood at their table, his lined face etched with emotion. The silver-haired manager's hands trembled slightly as he pulled out his order pad, but his voice was steady and warm. Everything's on the house tonight, Ranger. It's the least we can do. Jack shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Sir, that's not necessary. I insist. Mr. Harris's tone left no room for argument. He tucked his pen behind his ear and pulled up a chair, settling into it with the ease of someone used to making guests feel welcome. Your tab is taken care of. Forever. The diner had grown oddly quiet. The usual clatter of plates and murmur of conversation had died down to whispers and sideways glances. Some customers nodded approvingly, while others hunched over their meals, deliberately avoiding eye contact. Can I have chocolate milk? Lily asked, her earlier tears forgotten in the face of Mr. Harris's kindness. Her small hand smoothed a paper placemat in front of her. The best chocolate milk in town, coming right up. Mr. Harris smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. And for your dad? Just coffee, Black, Jack said quietly. He was still processing the sudden change in treatment, his shoulders tense beneath his worn jacket. And maybe some of that meatloaf I smell? 2 specials, Mr. Harris wrote it down with a flourish. Extra gravy on yours, Ranger. You look like you could use a good meal after your shift. Jack's expression softened slightly. Thank you, sir. Harris. Just Harris. The manager stood, tucking his order pad away. And don't thank me. I know what that tab means. He gestured to Jack's jacket. My son. He wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for men like you. A few tables away, an elderly couple whispered to each other, their faces showing approval. But across the room, a group of younger men in business attire exchanged dark looks, their conversation barely audible but clearly disapproving. Mr. Harris returned quickly with their drinks. The chocolate milk came in a tall glass with a swirl of whipped cream on top, making Lily's eyes light up. Extra special for the little lady, he said with a wink. Lily took a long sip, emerging with a whipped cream mustache. Daddy, look! I'm Santa! Jack laughed, a rare sound that seemed to surprise even him. He reached across the table with a napkin, gently wiping her face. You sure are, sweetheart. The meatloaf arrived steaming hot, generous portions, accompanied by mashed potatoes and green beans. Mr. Harris had indeed added extra gravy, and the smell made Jack's stomach rumble audibly. Eat up, Mr. Harris encouraged, pulling up a chair again. Been meaning to ask, which battalion were you with? 75th Ranger Regiment, Jack answered between careful bites. 2nd Battalion. Mr. Harris nodded knowingly. My boy was with the 10th Mountain Division, Afghanistan, 2010. His convoy hit an IED outside Kandahar. His voice grew thick. Rangers were first on scene. Got him out under heavy fire. Jack set down his fork, meeting the older man's eyes. Understanding passed between them, the weight of service, sacrifice, and survival. The diner had settled into its usual rhythm, But the atmosphere remained charged. More customers had arrived, filling empty booths. Some openly stared at Jack and Lily, their expressions a mix of curiosity and judgment. Lily, oblivious to the attention, happily worked on her meal. She cut her meatloaf into tiny squares, arranging them in neat rows. "Daddy makes good meatloaf too," she announced. "But yours is yummier." Mr. Harris chuckled. "High praise indeed. He makes everything by himself now," Lily continued, her fork paused mid-air. "Since Mommy went to heaven." The manager's face softened with compassion. Jack's jaw tightened, but he kept his eyes on his plate. "That must be hard," Mr. Harris said gently. Lily nodded, her expression suddenly serious. "Sometimes people are mean about it, like that lady before." She pointed to where the fired waitress had been standing. "Mommy always said—" "Lily," Jack interrupted, his voice carrying a warning note. But Lily, with the honest directness of childhood, continued anyway. "Mommy always said people didn't want us because you're different." The words hung in the air like smoke. Mr. Harris's face changed as understanding dawned. Understanding of why some customers were still whispering, why others wouldn't meet Jack's eyes, why the fired waitress had been so quick to judge. The manager looked at Jack's features more closely now, seeing what he hadn't noticed before, the complexity of his racial heritage written in his skin tone, his features, his daughter's beautiful mixed appearance. The silence that followed Lily's words was deafening. Jack sat very still, his hands flat on the table, his expression carefully controlled, but his eyes held a world of pain, a father's grief for prejudices his daughter would face, battles he couldn't fight for her. Mr. Harris's weathered face showed shock, then deep shame, not for his own actions, but for the realization that Jack's struggles went far beyond his veteran status. The manager opened his mouth to speak, but for once, words failed him. The dinner plates were nearly empty now. Jack dabbed at the corners of Lily's mouth with a napkin, cleaning away the last traces of chocolate milkshake. She'd eaten every bite of her chicken, fingers, and fries, her eyes bright with contentment. It was the first time in weeks he'd seen her truly relaxed during a meal out. "Thank you again, Mr. Harris," Jack said, reaching for his wallet out of habit. "The food was excellent." "Put that away," Mr. Harris said firmly, waving off Jack's attempt to pay. He pulled up a chair again, settling in with purpose. "Listen, son. I've been thinking while you two were eating." Jack's shoulders tensed slightly. He'd learned that phrase usually preceded bad news, but Mr. Harris's expression remained kind. His weathered face creased with sincerity. "We could use someone like you here at the diner," Mr. Harris continued. "Part-time to start, evenings and weekends. Pays decent, plus tips." He gestured around the bustling restaurant. "Plenty of folks appreciate good service from someone who knows what hard work means." Jack's breath caught. The factory job barely covered their bills, and Lily was growing so fast, she needed new shoes again, and winter was coming. But memories of the waitress's sneers made his stomach clench. "I don't know, sir," he said quietly. "I appreciate the offer, but, Daddy, can we come back here?" Lily interrupted, her small hand tugging at his sleeve. "Mr. Harris makes the best milkshakes ever." Jack looked down at his daughter's face, seeing nothing but pure joy there. No awareness of the earlier tension, just happiness at having had a special evening with her father. His heart ached with love for her. "The evening shift would start after your factory hours, Mr. Harris added, his voice gentle but firm. "And I'm thinking the extra income wouldn't hurt with a growing girl to take care of." Jack rubbed his chin, considering. The diner was close to home, walking distance even. It would mean less time commuting between jobs, more time with Lily. And Mr. Harris seemed genuinely supportive, unlike his current supervisor who always seemed to find fault with his work. "I've got a 7-year-old to think about," Jack said slowly. "Can't commit to late nights." "We can work around your schedule," Mr. Harris assured him. "Family comes first here. Always has." He paused, then added more quietly. "My son, the one the Rangers saved? He's got kids of his own now. I know what it means to want the best for your children." Lily bounced in her seat, her braids swinging. "Please, Daddy, then we can have milkshakes whenever we want." "Not whenever," Jack corrected automatically. But he couldn't help smiling at her enthusiasm. He studied Mr. Harris's face, looking for any sign of insincerity or pity. He found none. "You sure about this, sir?" Jack asked. Some of your customers might not like it." Mr. Harris's expression hardened slightly. Anyone who has a problem with a decorated veteran serving their coffee can find somewhere else to eat. He softened again, looking at Lily. Besides, this little lady's smile would win over the grumpiest customer. Lily beamed, as if to prove his point. Jack felt something shift inside him, like a door creaking open after being shut too long. The weight of constant struggle, of trying to make ends meet while protecting Lily from the world's harshness, seemed a little lighter. "When would you want me to start?" he asked. Mr. Harris's face broke into a genuine smile. "How's tomorrow sound? Come by after your factory shift. We'll get the paperwork sorted." "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." "I know you won't, son." Mr. Harris stood, extending his hand. "And drop the sir. It's just Harris to friends." Jack shook his hand firmly, noting the strength in the older man's grip. As they gathered their things to leave, Lily hugged Mr. Harris's legs impulsively. "Thank you for being nice to my daddy," she said. Mr. Harris patted her head, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You're very welcome, sweetheart." Outside, the evening air had cooled. Jack helped Lily into her booster seat in their old sedan, making sure she was properly buckled in. His mind raced with thoughts of juggling 2 jobs, arranging childcare, all the potential problems ahead. But when he glanced in the rearview mirror, he saw Lily had already fallen asleep, a peaceful smile on her face. Jack gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. "Lord," he whispered, "give me strength to make this work, for her sake." He started the car, the engine's quiet rumble mixing with Lily's soft breathing in the back seat. The streetlights cast alternating patterns of light and shadow across his daughter's sleeping face as they drove home. Each flash illuminated her features, so like her mother's, reminding Jack of everything he had to protect, everything he had to prove. The diner job was a chance, maybe their best chance yet, but it was also a risk. More exposure meant more opportunities for judgment, more chances for people to show their true colors. Lily stirred slightly in her sleep, murmuring something about milkshakes. Jack's grip on the wheel loosened slightly, his prayer continuing silently as they made their way through the quiet streets toward home. The morning sun painted streaks of gold across the diner's windows as Jack pulled into the parking lot. His hands gripped the steering wheel a moment longer than necessary, steadying himself. The drive from Lily's school had been too short to calm his nerves. He dropped her off with extra hugs and promises to pick her up on time, her pink backpack bouncing as she skipped into her classroom. Now, dressed in a clean white shirt and his best jeans, Jack took a deep breath before pushing open his car door. The gravel crunched under his boots as he made his way to the diner's entrance. Through the windows, he could see the morning crowd already filling the booths, farmers having their usual breakfast, office workers grabbing coffee before work. The bell above the door chimed as he entered. Several heads turned his way. An elderly couple he recognized from church smiled and waved warmly. "Morning, soldier," the old man called out, raising his coffee cup in greeting. Jack nodded back, grateful for the kindness. But not everyone was welcoming. In the corner booth, 2 men in plaid shirts stiffened at his entrance, their conversation dropping to whispers. Their eyes followed him with undisguised suspicion. "Mr." Harris emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. "Right on time, Turner," he said, his voice carrying across the diner. "Come on back, let's get you started." The kitchen was a world of stainless steel and organized chaos. Steam rose from industrial-sized coffee makers, and the grill sizzled with breakfast orders. Mr. Harris handed Jack a fresh apron. "Ever worked in food service before?" Mr. Harris asked, showing Jack around the kitchen. "No, sir, but I'm a quick learner." Jack tied the apron strings behind his back, muscle memory from his Army days, making the knot precise and neat. "Good. We'll start you on basics, bussing tables, helping with prep work, learning the menu. Watch how the other servers handle their sections. Mr." Harris paused, his expression softening slightly. "And Jack, don't let anyone give you trouble. You're under my roof now." The morning rush kept Jack busy. He fell into a rhythm, clearing tables efficiently, refilling coffee cups, learning which customers liked their cream on the side and which preferred their toast extra crispy. His military training showed in his attention to detail and quick responses to requests. Around mid-morning, a young mother with 2 small children came in. When Jack approached their table with menus, her little boy pointed at him excitedly. "Mommy, he looks like my friend Marcus at school." The mother flushed red, shushing her child. "I'm so sorry," she said to Jack, but her smile was genuine. "Kids just say whatever's on their minds." "No apology needed, ma'am," Jack replied, warming to the child's innocent observation. "What can I get you folks to drink?" As he worked, Jack couldn't help but notice the mix of reactions he received. Some customers treated him with particular respect after spotting his ranger tattoo peeking out from under his rolled-up sleeve. Others seemed to go out of their way to avoid eye contact. Mr. Harris watched approvingly as Jack handled each interaction with quiet dignity. During a brief lull, he pulled Jack aside. "You're doing well, son. Got the same focus I see in most rangers. Deliberate, thorough." "Thank you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity." Jack meant it. The morning's work had been honest and straightforward, a welcome change from the factory's impersonal assembly line. But then he heard them, the two men from the corner booth, now standing by the register. Their voices carried just enough for Jack to catch their words. "Town's changing," one muttered, counting out his payment. "Used to know everybody here." "Yeah," his companion replied. "These outsiders moving in, mixed families and all. Not like it used to be." Jack's shoulders tensed, but he kept working, wiping down a nearby table with measured strokes. The words weren't new. He'd heard variations of them his whole life, especially after marrying Lily's mother. Mr. Harris must have heard too. He took their payment with cold efficiency, no trace of his usual friendly banter. After they left, he caught Jack's eye and shook his head slightly, a silent acknowledgement of the ugliness they'd witnessed. The rest of the morning passed quickly, but the men's words lingered like a bad taste. As Jack's shift ended, he hung up his apron with careful precision, his movements controlled but his mind uneasy. The diner had felt like a potential haven after last night, but now he wondered if he was just setting himself and Lily up for more hurt. Mr. Harris approached as Jack prepared to leave. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked, his tone making it clear he understood if Jack wanted to reconsider. Jack thought of Lily's face when he told her about the new job, how her eyes had lit up at the idea of having dinner at the diner sometime. He thought of his own pride when customers had thanked him for his service, of the satisfaction in doing simple, honest work. "Yes, sir," he replied firmly. "Same time tomorrow." The morning rush had settled into a comfortable lull at Harris's diner. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching dust motes that danced in the air as Jack wiped down the counter with steady, methodical strokes. His first week working at the diner had been a mix of small victories and quiet challenges. On Tuesday, he'd noticed Mrs. Peterson, one of the regular customers in her 80s, struggling with a wobbly chair. Without a word, Jack had retrieved his small tool kit from his truck. The old woman had watched, surprised, as he tightened the loose bolts and tested the chair's stability. "Thank you, young man," she'd said, her wrinkled face softening. "My Harold used to fix things like that." The mention of her late husband made her eyes mist over. Jack had simply nodded, understanding loss all too well. "It's no trouble, ma'am. Please let me know if anything else needs fixing." Word spread about the small act of kindness. By Wednesday, Mr. Harris had Jack looking at the temperamental coffee maker, and somehow the diner felt a bit more like home with every repair. Thursday brought rain, and with it, the Hendersons, an elderly couple who'd been married for 52 years. Jack had watched through the window as they struggled with their umbrella in the parking lot. Without hesitation, he grabbed a large umbrella from behind the counter and jogged out to help them. "Here, let me get that for you," he'd said, shielding them from the downpour. Mr. Henderson had gripped his arm gratefully, while Mrs. Henderson had patted his cheek like a grandmother might. "Such a gentleman," she'd declared loudly enough for others to hear. "They don't make many like you anymore." The stares hadn't stopped completely. Some customers still whispered behind their menus, and a few even requested different tables when Jack was assigned to their section. But he met each slight with the same quiet dignity he'd learned in the Rangers, letting his actions speak louder than words. By Friday, more regulars were greeting him by name. "Morning, Jack," they'd say, or "How's your little girl doing?" The questions were genuine, the smiles real. Saturday morning brought the weekend crowd, and with them came Grace Miller. She entered the diner just as Jack was refilling coffee cups, her presence gentle but somehow filling the room. Her dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, and her eyes carried the kind of warmth that made others feel instantly at ease. Jack noticed her watching him as he worked, but it wasn't the usual suspicious stare he'd grown accustomed to. There was something different in her gaze. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition of a shared pain. The bell above the door chimed again, and Lily burst in, followed by Mrs. Watson, their elderly neighbor who watched her on Saturday mornings when Jack worked the breakfast shift. "Daddy!" Lily called out, her face lighting up. She wore her favorite yellow dress, the one that matched her sunny personality. "There's my girl," Jack said, his whole demeanor softening as he set down the coffee pot and knelt to hug her. "Did you have fun with Mrs. Watson?" "We made cookies," Lily announced proudly. "And I drew pictures. She's quite the artist," Mrs. Watson added with a fond smile before heading to her usual booth. Grace approached them then, her steps unhurried. "You must be the famous Lily I've heard so much about," she said, her voice warm and rich like honey. "I'm Grace. I've seen you at church with your daddy." Lily looked up at her, curiosity replacing shyness. "You have pretty hair," she said matter-of-factly, making Grace laugh. "Thank you, sweetheart." Grace knelt down to Lily's level, her eyes twinkling. "You know what? You have your mother's bright eyes." Jack's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't shown anyone photos of Sarah, hadn't talked about her much since moving to town, but Grace was right. Lily had inherited her mother's expressive brown eyes, always dancing with light and life. Lily's face broke into a radiant smile. "Really? Daddy says that too." She turned to Jack. "Daddy, did you hear? Miss Grace knows about Mommy's eyes." Jack managed a nod, touched by the simple observation and the joy it brought his daughter. "She's right, Princess. You do have your mama's eyes." Grace stood, smoothing her skirt. "I remember seeing Sarah at church years ago, before I moved away to care for my parents. She always had such a beautiful smile, just like yours, Lily." The moment was interrupted by Mr. Harris calling from the kitchen. "Jack, order up for table 6. "I should get back to work," Jack said, straightening up. "Lily, why don't you show Miss Grace your drawings while I finish my shift?" "Can I?" Lily asked eagerly, already pulling her backpack off her shoulders. Grace's eyes crinkled at the corners as she smiled. "I'd love to see them. Maybe we can sit by the window? The light's better there." Lily skipped to a sunny booth, pulling out her collection of crayon masterpieces, while Grace followed, her presence as natural as the morning sunshine streaming through the windows. Jack watched them for a moment, his daughter's animated gestures, Grace's attentive expression, before picking up the waiting orders. As he moved through the diner, delivering plates and refilling cups, he could hear Lily's happy chatter mixing with Grace's gentle laughter. The sound wrapped around him like a warm blanket, making the diner feel more like home than it had all week. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the diner's checkered floor as Grace Miller gathered her purse, preparing to leave. She'd been watching Jack throughout her meal, how he treated everyone with equal kindness, regardless of their response to him. The way he'd stop whatever he was doing whenever Lily needed him, even just to show him a drawing she'd made at the corner booth where she sat doing homework. "The coffee was perfect today," Grace said softly, her warm brown eyes meeting Jack's. "You've picked up Mr. Harris's special brew technique quickly." Jack offered a polite smile as he collected her empty cup. "Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Harris is a good teacher." "Please call me Grace." She adjusted her cardigan, a gentle powder blue that matched the spring sky outside. "You know, our church is just down on Maple Street. We'd love to have you and Lily join us this Sunday." Jack's shoulders tensed slightly, his movements becoming more mechanical as he wiped the counter. "That's kind of you. But we're not really church people anymore." Lily's head popped up from her math homework, her eyes bright with interest. "Can we go, Daddy? Sarah from my class goes there." "Not this time, sweetie," Jack said firmly, though his expression softened when he looked at his daughter. "We've got to do laundry on Sunday." Grace watched the exchange with understanding in her eyes. She'd seen that look before, the way pain could make someone build walls around their heart, especially when it came to faith. "The laundry will still be there in the afternoon," she said gently. "Our congregation is very welcoming, Jack. No pressure, no judgments. Like the waitress was welcoming?" The words slipped out before Jack could stop them, sharper than he'd intended. He immediately regretted it when he saw Grace flinch. "I'm sorry. That wasn't fair. You've been nothing but kind." "No, you're right to be cautious," Grace acknowledged. "What happened with that waitress was wrong. But not everyone in town shares those prejudices. Our pastor speaks often about God's love being for everyone, no exceptions." Jack turned away, busying himself with organizing the napkin dispensers. "I used to believe that. Then my wife got sick, and all the prayers in the world didn't save her." Lily doesn't need to learn about a God who doesn't answer when you need him most. "Daddy," Lily's small voice cut through the tension. She'd abandoned her homework and moved closer, her brown eyes so like her mother's looking up at him pleadingly. "Mommy used to take me to church. She said it's where angels sing. Don't you remember?" Jack's hands stilled on the napkin holder. Of course, he remembered. Maria had loved church, had found peace there even during her final days. The memory of her sitting in the hospital bed, still humming hymns despite her pain, hit him like a physical blow. Grace waited patiently, not pushing. When she spoke again, her voice was gentle as a summer breeze. "Sometimes the hardest prayers are answered in ways we don't understand at the time. I lost my husband 3 years ago. I was angry too, felt abandoned. But the church community became my family when I needed one most." Lily tugged at Jack's sleeve. "Please, Daddy. I promise I'll be extra good. And I'll help with the laundry after." Jack looked down at his daughter's hopeful face, then back at Grace. There was something in her expression that reminded him of Maria, not in her features, but in that same quiet strength, that unwavering faith that had always both frustrated and amazed him. "We sit in the back," he said finally, his voice rough. "And we leave, if it gets to be too much." Lily's face lit up like Christmas morning. She threw her arms around his waist, squeezing tight. "Thank you, Daddy. Can I wear my yellow dress? The one Mommy bought me?" "Sure, baby." Jack stroked her hair, trying to ignore the way his heart clenched at the mention of the dress, the last one Maria had picked out, still hanging with its tags in Lily's closet. Grace smiled, but kept her victory celebration subtle. "Service starts at 10. But come at 9:30 if you'd like. We have coffee and donuts in the fellowship hall beforehand." She gathered her things, then paused. "You know, Jack, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is open ourselves to hope again." Jack nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He watched as Grace left the diner, the bell above the door chiming softly in her wake. Lily had already returned to her homework, humming a tune he recognized from years ago, one of Maria's favorite hymns. Mr. Harris, who had been quietly observing from the kitchen, came out wiping his hands on his apron. "Grace is good people," he said simply. "Lost her Steve to cancer, same year you lost your Maria. She's been holding this community together ever since, especially the kids at the youth center." "I'm not looking for—" Jack started. "Nobody said you were, mister," Harris cut him off kindly. "But Lily needs more than just her daddy, strong as you are. And maybe you need more than just memories, hard as that is to admit." Jack turned back to his work, but his mind was already racing ahead to Sunday. He'd have to iron Lily's yellow dress, the one that had been waiting unworn for so long. He'd have to face the stares, the whispers that might come. But when he looked at Lily's excited face as she planned her outfit, he knew he'd endure anything to keep that joy alive in her eyes. Still, he would sit in the back. Some habits of protection were too ingrained to break all at once. The old wooden church doors creaked as Jack and Lily stepped inside that Sunday morning. The familiar scent of polished pews and well-worn hymnals filled the air. Jack's shoulders tensed as heads turned their way, but Lily's small hand squeezed his reassuringly. "Look, Daddy, there's Miss Grace," Lily whispered excitedly, pointing to where Grace sat near the middle of the church. Grace waved them over with a warm smile. Jack hesitated, then guided Lily down the aisle, nodding politely to those who met his eyes. Some returned genuine smiles, while others quickly looked away. "I saved you both seats," Grace said softly, sliding over to make room. Lily happily settled between them, her Sunday dress rustling against the wooden pew. The morning sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, painting rainbow patterns across the worn carpet. Pastor Daniel stepped up to the pulpit, his kind eyes scanning the congregation before landing on Jack with a welcoming nod. "Today," the pastor began, his voice carrying clearly through the chapel, "we're blessed to have both familiar faces and new friends joining us." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the room. "And as we prepare for Veterans Day this week, I want to take a moment to honor those who've served our country." Jack's jaw tightened. He hadn't known about this part of the service. Lily looked up at him proudly as Pastor Daniels continued. "These brave men and women embody the very essence of sacrifice and love that Jesus taught us. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. The pastor's words rang with sincerity. Would our veterans please stand, if able, so we may thank you? A few older men rose slowly throughout the church. Jack remained seated until Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Stand up, Daddy," she whispered. "You're a hero, too." Grace touched his arm gently. "She's right, you know." With a deep breath, Jack stood. He noticed Mr. Harris, sitting a few rows ahead, rise as well. He hadn't known the diner manager was a veteran, too. Several congregation members turned to look at Jack, and this time, many faces showed respect rather than judgment. "Thank you for your service," Pastor Daniel said solemnly. "Let us pray for these warriors among us, who carried burdens we cannot imagine, so that we might live in peace." After the service ended, people lingered in small groups, chatting and sharing coffee in the fellowship hall. Jack was about to make a quiet exit when Grace caught up to them, balancing 3 paper cups of lemonade. "For my favorite father-daughter duo," she said, handing them drinks. "And don't even think about sneaking away." Mrs. Thompson brought her famous cookies. Lily's eyes lit up. "Can I have one, Daddy? Please?" "Just one," Jack agreed, watching as his daughter skipped off to the cookie table where other children gathered. "You looked uncomfortable during the veteran recognition," Grace observed gently, leading Jack to a quiet corner of the hall. Jack shifted his weight. "I'm not used to attention, especially not the good kind." "You know," Grace said thoughtfully, "being a ranger shaped who you are, but it's not all you are." She watched Lily laughing with the other children. "You're also that little girl's whole world, a man of integrity who works hard at the factory and the diner, someone who fixes chairs for elderly couples without being asked." "You notice that?" Jack asked, surprised. "I notice a lot of things," Grace smiled, "including how you treat people with kindness, even when they don't deserve it. That's not just military training, that's who you are in your heart." Jack was silent for a moment, watching Lily share her cookie with a younger child. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough for her, for anyone, really." Grace's eyes brightened. "You know, if you want to do more, there are always opportunities, especially with Veterans Day coming up." "What do you mean?" "Well, I've seen how some of our local veterans struggle. Mr. Peterson down the street can barely afford his medications. And young Tom, who came back last year, he's still looking for work." Jack nodded slowly, an idea forming. "The diner," he started. "Yes. What if we organized a charity dinner? For veterans and their families?" The words came faster now. "We could serve meals, maybe raise some money for those who need help. Show people that veterans aren't just old war stories. They're our neighbors." Grace's face lit up. "Jack, that's perfect. The whole community could get involved." Later that evening, Jack proposed the idea to Mr. Harris as they closed up the diner. The manager's eyes grew misty as Jack explained the plan. "Son, that's exactly what this town needs," Mr. Harris said, clapping Jack on the shoulder. "We'll do it right here. I'll donate the space and food costs." Word spread quickly through the small town. Jack overheard different reactions as he worked his shifts that week. Some customers enthusiastically offered to help, asking about donation options and volunteering to serve food. Others muttered about charity cases and making everything about veterans. But for the first time since moving to town, Jack felt purpose beyond survival. During a quiet moment at the diner counter, he caught his reflection in the polished coffee machine. The face looking back at him wasn't just a tired single dad or a former ranger. It was someone who could make a difference. Grace stopped by each day, bringing new ideas and encouragement. Her gentle presence and unwavering support helped Jack navigate the mixed reactions from townspeople. Together they started making plans, writing lists, and spreading the word through the church bulletin and local paper. "Some people won't like it," Mr. Harris warned one evening as they reviewed the planning details. "They resist anything new in this town." "I know," Jack replied, thinking of Lily's hopeful face when he told her about the dinner. "But maybe that's exactly why we need to do it." The buzz around town grew louder as the week progressed. Jack heard whispers and caught sideways glances as he worked, but he kept his head high and focused on the task ahead. The divide in the community was clear, those eager to help and those resistant to change, but Jack refused to let it discourage him. During his factory shift, co-workers began asking about the dinner. Some offered to pitch in. while others made excuses to avoid the topic entirely. The town's underlying tensions bubbled just beneath the surface, but Jack held on to Grace's words about being more than just a soldier. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about building bridges in a community that desperately needed them. The diner glowed with warmth on that crisp evening, strings of white lights twinkling from the ceiling like stars. Red, white, and blue bunting draped the windows, and hand-drawn signs by local children welcomed veterans with colorful messages of thanks. The usually modest space had been transformed into something magical. Jack adjusted his tie, borrowed from Mr. Harris, and watched as people filed in. The sight made his throat tight. Veterans in their service caps sat beside families who'd never spoken to him before. Young kids darted between tables decorated with small American flags and mason jars filled with wildflowers. "Quite a turnout," Mr. Harris said, appearing beside Jack. His eyes were misty as he surveyed the packed diner. "Never seen so many folks in here at once," Jack nodded, trying to steady his nerves. "Thank you for letting us do this." "Letting you? Son, you're the one who made this happen." "Mister?" Harris clapped him on the shoulder. "Look there, even old Mrs. Peterson came. Haven't seen her leave her house in months." Sure enough, the elderly widow sat in the corner, chatting with a young Marine and his family. Her usual stern expression had softened into something close to joy. Grace moved through the crowd with practiced ease, making sure everyone had plates full of home-cooked dishes contributed by the community. She caught Jack's eye and gave him an encouraging smile. She'd been instrumental in organizing the event, reaching out to church members who'd initially been hesitant. The sound of silverware tapping glass cut through the cheerful buzz of conversation. Mr. Harris stood at the center of the room. "Folks, if I could have your attention," he called out. "The man behind tonight's gathering has a few words to share." Jack's heart hammered as he made his way to the front. He hadn't prepared a speech, hadn't trusted himself to write one without his emotions spilling over. But looking at the faces before him, he knew what needed to be said. "I'm not much for public speaking," he began, his voice quiet but steady. "When I was in the Rangers, we let our actions do the talking. But tonight, I want to talk about something that matters more than any medal or commendation." He paused, finding Lily's face in the crowd. She sat between Grace and an older veteran, her eyes shining with pride. "Service isn't just what we do in uniform," Jack continued. "It's what we do every day for each other. It's the neighbor who checks on the elderly couple next door, the teacher who stays late to help a struggling student, the stranger who holds the door for someone having a rough day." Heads nodded throughout the room. Jack saw a few veterans dabbing at their eyes. "When I came home from my last deployment, I was lost. My wife had passed, and I had a beautiful daughter to raise alone. I thought being strong meant staying silent, keeping our struggles to ourselves." His voice wavered slightly. "I was wrong." The room had grown so quiet you could hear the gentle hum of the ceiling fans. "Real strength is what I see in this room tonight. It's in the courage to reach out when someone's hurting. The bravery to admit when we've judged too quickly. The power of a community that chooses love over fear." An older veteran in the corner called out, "Hoo-ah!" Several others echoed the cry, making Lily giggle. "This dinner isn't just about thanking veterans, though we're grateful for their service," Jack said. "It's about remembering that we're all in this together. Every one of us has fought battles others can't see. Every one of us needs a helping hand sometimes." He gestured to the room full of people who, just weeks ago, had been strangers or worse. "Look around. This is what healing looks like. This is what home feels like." The applause started slowly, then built until it filled every corner of the diner. People rose to their feet, some wiping tears, others beaming. "Mister," Harris couldn't stop nodding, his face glowing with pride. As the clapping continued, Jack felt a small body crash into his legs. Lily hugged him tight, her face tilted up with pure joy. "Daddy, they love you," she whispered. And for the first time in years, Jack felt hope blooming in his chest, like a flower reaching for the Sunday. The success of the charity dinner still hung in the air as Jack and Mr. Harris finished cleaning up. Empty plates, half-drunk coffee cups, and crumpled napkins littered the tables, evidence of the joyful gathering that had filled the diner just hours before. The clock on the wall showed nearly midnight. "That speech you gave, Jack," Mr. Harris said, stacking chairs. "Never seen this town so quiet, hanging on every word like that." Jack wiped down the counter, his movements steady and methodical. "Just spoke from the heart, sir." And that's exactly why it worked. Mr. Harris paused, leaning on a chair back. You know, when my son wrote home about the ranger who saved his unit, well, I never thought I'd get to thank one of you personally. A small smile crossed Jack's tired face. The evening had been more than he dared to hope for. Seeing veterans and townspeople sharing meals together, hearing laughter blend with serious conversation, watching Lily proudly help serve desserts. For a few precious hours, the walls of prejudice had seemed to crumble. "Time to lock up, mister," Harris announced, jingling his keys. "You head on home to that little girl of yours. She was something special tonight." Jack nodded, gathering his jacket. Lily had fallen asleep in Grace's car. The kind widow had offered to take her home early when the cleanup began. The thought of his daughter's proud face earlier made his heart swell. They stepped out into the cool night air, Mr. Harris reaching to pull down the security gate. But something made him freeze mid-motion, the metal rattling to a stop. "Good Lord," he whispered. Jack followed his gaze and felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Harsh black letters stretched across the diner's white walls, ugly words that made his stomach turn. Racial slurs, anti-military hate, threats against their kind. The paint was still wet, dripping down like tears. His hands began to shake. All the joy of the evening drained away, replaced by a familiar cold weight. The same weight he'd carried through combat, through losing his wife, through every sideways glance and whispered comment in this town. "I'm calling the police," Mr. Harris growled, already pulling out his phone. His voice shook with rage. "Right now! This instant!" Jack couldn't speak. He stepped closer to the wall, reading words that burned themselves into his mind, words that would haunt Lily if she saw them. His daughter, his beautiful, innocent daughter, who had just begun to believe they belonged here. "Jack, don't touch it," Mr. Harris warned. "Let the police document everything." But Jack's fingers were already brushing the wet paint, coming away black and damning. He stared at his stained hand, remembering how just hours ago these same fingers had held a microphone, thanking the community for coming together. How naive he'd been. Red and blue lights began to flash in the distance. Mr. Harris was speaking urgently into his phone, pacing back and forth. The night had grown colder, or maybe it was just the ice forming around Jack's heart. His phone buzzed. A text from Grace. "Lily's asking for you. She had a nightmare." The police cruiser pulled up, lights painting the hateful graffiti in alternating crimson and azure. Two officers stepped out, their faces grim as they took in the scene. "Mr. Turner?" one asked, approaching carefully. "We'll need a statement." Jack nodded mechanically, answering their questions in short, quiet sentences. Yes, the dinner had ended around 10. No, he hadn't seen anyone suspicious. Yes, he would press charges if they found who did it. Mr. Harris provided security camera footage, his voice rising as he described the evening's events. "This was a charity dinner, for God's sake, veterans and families." The officers took photos, collected paint samples, dusted for fingerprints. Jack watched it all as if from a great distance, feeling hollow. He'd seen this before. The slow grind of investigations that often led nowhere. The well-meaning promises that justice would be served. "We'll increase patrols in the area," the senior officer assured them. "This kind of hate crime won't be tolerated." Hate crime. The words echoed in Jack's mind. After all his service, all his sacrifices, after trying so hard to build a life here. His phone buzzed again. Grace. "She's crying for you, Jack. Keeps asking why some people were whispering mean things at the dinner." The message hit him like a physical blow. Even during their moment of triumph, someone had been poisoning his daughter's joy. He hadn't protected her. Again. "Go home," Mr. Harris said softly, reading the anguish on Jack's face. "Go to your girl. I'll handle things here." The drive home was a blur. Streetlights smeared past his windows like trails of tears. The radio stayed off. He couldn't bear even the possibility of cheerful music right now. Grace's car was in his driveway, warm light spilling from his small house's windows. She met him at the door, her face etched with concern. "She finally dozed off about 10 minutes ago," Grace whispered. "But she's been asking why people were saying unkind things about you both. I didn't know what to tell her." Jack nodded, unable to speak his thanks. Grace squeezed his arm gently before leaving, her footsteps fading into the night. He found Lily in her bed, tear tracks still visible on her cheeks. Her small hands clutched her favorite stuffed bear, a last gift from her mother. As if sensing his presence, she stirred. "Daddy, I'm here, baby." He sat on the edge of her bed, trying to keep his voice steady. "Why do they hate us, Daddy?" Her question came out in a broken whisper, heavy with confusion and hurt no child should have to bear. Jack stared at his hands, still stained with traces of black paint. How could he explain hate to someone so pure? How could he protect her in a world determined to make her feel unwanted? Lily's quiet sobs filled the darkness, and Jack gathered her into his arms, holding her close as she cried herself back to sleep. Each tear that soaked into his shirt felt like an accusation, a reminder that all his strength, all his service, all his love wasn't enough to shield her from this pain. The factory's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Jack mechanically fed metal sheets into the stamping machine. His movements were precise but empty, like a robot going through its programming. The rhythmic thud-thud-thud of the press matched his heartbeat, but couldn't drown out the memory of those hateful words sprayed across the diner's walls. He hadn't slept. After holding Lily until her tears dried, he'd spent hours staring at his bedroom ceiling, replaying every moment of hope from the charity dinner that now felt like a cruel joke. The veterans' smiles, the townspeople's applause, Lily's proud beam, all of it tainted by a few cans of spray paint and centuries of hatred. "Turner!" his supervisor called out. "You okay there? That's the third piece you've misaligned." Jack blinked, focusing on the warped metal piece before him. "Sorry, sir. Won't happen again. Take 5, get some coffee. You look like hell." In the break room, Jack poured himself a cup of bitter coffee, but couldn't bring himself to drink it. The morning news played on a small TV in the corner, and his stomach churned when he caught the words "local diner" and "vandalism." He turned away, but not before seeing the grainy security camera footage of the diner's defaced walls. His phone buzzed. Another message from Mr. Harris asking when he'd be in for his afternoon shift. Jack's thumb hovered over the reply button, but he couldn't type the words. The thought of walking into that diner, of seeing pity in some faces and satisfaction in others, made his chest tight. When his shift ended, Jack sat in his truck for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. He should drive to the diner. He should show up, head held high, prove to them all that they couldn't break him. But all he could think about was Lily's tear-stained face, asking why people hated them. Instead, he drove to Mrs. Chen's house to pick up Lily early from after-school care. The elderly woman greeted him with concerned eyes. "Mr. Turner, Lily told me about what happened," she said softly. "Such shame. Such terrible shame." Jack managed a weak smile. "Thank you for watching her, Mrs. Chen." Lily came running, her backpack bouncing. "Daddy, are we going to the diner? I want to help Mr. Harris clean." "Not today, sweetheart." Jack cut her off, perhaps too sharply. He softened his voice. "We're going straight home." In their small house, Jack went through the motions of making dinner, mac and cheese from a box, Lily's favorite. But as he stirred the pot, his mind wandered to job listings he'd seen in other towns. Places where nobody knew them, where they could start fresh. Lily deserved better than suspicious glares and whispered slurs. "Daddy?" Lily's voice pulled him back. "The cheese is burning." Jack cursed under his breath and moved the pot off the heat. The bottom layer was scorched, but he served it anyway. Lily picked at her food, unusual for her. "Are you mad at Mr. Harris?" she asked suddenly. "No, baby." "Why would you think that?" "Because you didn't go to work at the diner today, and you're making your thinking face, the one when you're mad but trying not to show it." Jack set down his fork. "I'm not mad at Mr. Harris, I'm just thinking about some changes." "What kind of changes?" Before Jack could answer, a knock at the door made them both jump. Through the window, he could see Grace standing on their small porch, holding what looked like a casserole dish. Jack's first instinct was to pretend they weren't home, but Lily was already running to answer the door. "Grace!" she exclaimed, throwing it open. "Hello, sweetheart." Grace smiled warmly, then looked at Jack with gentle concern. "I missed you at the diner today. Brought you both some dinner. My mother's recipe for chicken pot pie." "You didn't have to do that," Jack said, his voice rough. "I wanted to." Grace stepped inside, setting the dish on their small kitchen counter. She looked at their half-eaten mac and cheese. "And it seems I came just in time." "Lily, why don't you go start your homework?" Jack suggested. His daughter looked between them, clearly wanting to stay. but nodded and gathered her school books. Once Lily was in her room, Grace turned to Jack. "The whole town's talking about what happened." "I bet they are," Jack said bitterly. "The police have leads. And the community, the real community, not those cowards with spray paint. We're standing with you." Jack laughed, a hollow sound. "Standing with me? Where were they all these months? Where were they when people crossed the street to avoid us? Or when the checkout lady at the grocery store wouldn't touch my hand giving me change?" "Jack, I can't do this anymore, Grace. I can't keep fighting every day just to prove I deserve to exist in this town. And I won't put Lily through it." Understanding dawned on Grace's face. "You're thinking of leaving. I've been looking at job postings. There's a factory 2 states over, decent schools nearby." "You can't run," Grace interrupted, her voice firm but kind. "This is your home now. Lily's home. You've built something here. Something real. Those veterans at the dinner, they need you. Mr. Harris needs you. The church." "The church?" Jack scoffed. "Where God watched my wife die and now watches his people treat his children like dirt?" Grace flinched but held her ground. "Faith isn't about other people, Jack. It's about finding strength when we're at our weakest. And right now, you're letting them win. Maybe they already have." Jack moved to the door, holding it open. "Thank you for the pot pie, Grace, and for everything else. But I need to do what's best for my daughter." "Running isn't what's best," Grace said softly, pausing in the doorway. "Your strength, your dignity in the face of cruelty, that's teaching Lily more than hiding ever could." Jack looked away, his jaw tight. "Good night, Grace." He closed the door gently but firmly, leaning his forehead against it afterward. Through the wood, he could hear Grace's footsteps slowly retreat down the porch steps. The house felt emptier somehow, the weight of his decision pressing down like a physical thing. From Lily's room came the sound of her humming. "Amazing Grace," the hymn she'd learned at church. The same hymn his wife used to sing when things got hard. Jack closed his eyes, let the darkness behind his eyelids swallow him whole, and wondered if he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Pastor Daniel's old station wagon pulled up beside Mr. Harris's pickup truck in Jack's small driveway. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the patchy lawn of the modest rental house. Jack watched through the living room window as the 2 men approached his front door, their faces etched with concern. The knock came soft, but firm. Jack considered not answering, but years of military discipline wouldn't let him hide. He opened the door, standing tall despite the exhaustion that weighed on his shoulders. "Jack," Pastor Daniel said warmly, though his eyes reflected worry. "May we come in?" Jack stepped aside wordlessly, gesturing them into the small living room where Lily's drawings decorated the walls, bright splashes of crayon hope against peeling wallpaper. "Mr." Harris's usual brisk manner was subdued as he settled into the worn armchair. "Where's Lily?" the pastor asked, looking around the quiet house. "At the babysitter's," Jack replied, his voice flat. "I picked up an extra shift at the factory." Mr. Harris leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped together. "Son, about what happened at the diner. I've already filed a police report," Jack cut in, remaining standing. "There's nothing more to discuss." "There's plenty to discuss," Pastor Daniels said gently. "The congregation is outraged. People want to help, to show support." Jack's laugh held no humor. "Now they want to help? Where were they when people whispered behind our backs? When Lily came home crying because kids wouldn't play with her?" "You're right," Mr. Harris admitted, his voice gruff with emotion. "We should have done more sooner, but you can't let these cowards win by running away." Jack's jaw tightened. "I fought wars. I can't fight hate in my own town." He paced the small room, tension radiating from his shoulders. "Every morning I put on a smile for Lily. I tell her to be proud of who she island. But how can I keep saying that when this town shows her otherwise?" Pastor Daniel stood, placing a steady hand on Jack's shoulder. "You're one of the bravest men I know, Jack. Not just because you served, but because every day you choose love over bitterness. That's real courage." "Courage?" Jack shrugged off the hand. "Courage is knowing the mission's worth the cost. But this," he gestured around him, "the cost is too high. It's Lily who pays it." "Mister." Harris rose, his voice firm but kind. "Remember that first night at the diner? You didn't fight back with anger. You showed dignity. That changed hearts, Jack, more than you know." "The charity dinner proved it," Pastor Daniels added. People came together. They saw you, really saw you. Don't let one act of hatred erase all that good. Jack moved to the window, staring out at the lengthening shadows. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I've got to think about what's best for Lily. Is running away best for her? Mr. Harris asked quietly. Teaching her that hate wins? Jack turned, his eyes fierce. Don't use my daughter to manipulate me. We're not manipulating, Pastor Daniels said softly. We're reminding you of who you are. A warrior? Yes, but more importantly, a father who shows his daughter what it means to stand tall with grace. The room fell silent, except for the distant ticking of the kitchen clock. Finally, Jack spoke, his voice tired. I need time to think. Please. The two men exchanged glances, knowing they couldn't push harder. Pastor Daniels placed a card on the coffee table. The church is always open if you need a quiet place to pray. Or just think. Mr. Harris paused at the door. The diner misses you, Jack. Both of you. After they left, Jack sat alone in the growing darkness, their words echoing in his mind. When the babysitter dropped Lily off, he managed to smile for her, helped with homework, and made dinner. But his thoughts churned like storm clouds. Later that night, after tucking Lily in, Jack stood in her doorway, watching her peaceful sleep. Moonlight filtered through the butterfly curtains Grace had helped hang, casting gentle shadows across his daughter's face. She looked so much like her mother. The same gentle curve of cheek, the same trusting expression even in sleep. In the quiet darkness, Jack felt the weight of decision pressing down on him. He could pack their belongings, find another town, start fresh. Maybe somewhere bigger, more diverse, where Lily wouldn't feel so different. Or they could stay, face the struggle, hope for change. He watched his daughter's chest rise and fall with each breath, torn between protecting her and teaching her to stand strong. The choice hung in the air like a heavy cloud, refusing to lift or break. The wooden pews of First Baptist Church creaked under shifting bodies as Jack sat in the last row, his shoulders tense. He hadn't planned to come today, but Lily had begged him with those big brown eyes of hers. Please, Daddy, she'd whispered. Jesus still loves us, right? Now here they were, Jack in his cleanest work shirt and Lily in her favorite yellow dress. The morning sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the worn hymnal in his hands. He hadn't sung a single word all service, letting the familiar melodies wash over him without participation. Pastor Daniels stood at the pulpit, his sermon drawing to a close. And so we must ask ourselves, what does it mean to truly love our neighbor? The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with meaning. Jack felt eyes occasionally drift his way, some sympathetic, others still wary. Lily fidgeted beside him, her small hands twisting the fabric of her dress. Jack noticed her breathing had quickened, the way it did when she was working up her courage for something. Before he could whisper a question, she was on her feet. Lily, he murmured, reaching for her arm, but she was already stepping into the aisle. The congregation rustled with surprise as the little girl walked purposefully toward the front. Her patent leather shoes clicked against the hardwood floor, echoing in the sudden quiet. Pastor Daniels paused mid-sentence, watching with gentle curiosity as Lily approached the steps to the pulpit. Jack's heart hammered in his chest. He wanted to stop her, to protect her from whatever pain might come, but something in her determined stride held him back. Lily turned at the front, facing the congregation. She seemed so small standing there, her hands clasped in front of her, chin lifted with a child's pure conviction. The silence stretched, thick with anticipation. Her voice quavered, then grew stronger. I need to say something. Pastor Daniels nodded encouragingly, stepping slightly aside to give her space. Jack sat frozen, his hands gripping the pew in front of him. My daddy is my hero, Lily began, her voice clear despite its trembling. He saved people, he saved me. Her eyes found Jack's across the room, filled with such love it made his throat tight. Please don't hate us anymore. The simplicity of her words cut through the air like a knife through butter. Several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Mrs. Peterson, who had always hurried her grandchildren away when Jack approached, pressed a handkerchief to her mouth. Daddy fights the bad dreams at night, Lily continued, her voice growing stronger. He makes me pancakes shaped like hearts. He works 2 jobs so I can have pretty dresses. She smoothed her yellow skirt. And he never says mean things back when people are mean to him. Jack felt tears burning behind his eyes. He hadn't known she'd noticed the nightmares. Hadn't realized she understood so much. Mama used to say that Jesus loves everybody the same. Lily's voice cracked slightly. So why don't you? The question hung in the air like a bell toll. Someone in the middle pews sniffled. Mr. Thompson, who had been among the loudest critics of Jack's presence in town, stared at his hands, his face red with shame. My daddy teaches me to be brave, Lily said, her small shoulders straight. He says that doing the right thing is more important than being liked. But, she paused, and now tears did spill down her cheeks. But I think he deserves to be liked too. Grace, sitting a few rows ahead of Jack, was openly weeping now. Several other members of the congregation dabbed at their eyes. We don't want to leave. Lily's voice grew small but determined. This is our home. Daddy says home is where your heart feels safe. She looked around the church, meeting eyes that now couldn't look away. Can't this be our safe place too? The silence that followed was profound. Jack felt something break inside his chest. All the walls he'd built, all the pain he'd hidden from his daughter. But with that breaking came something else. A surge of love and pride so intense it threatened to overwhelm him. Pastor Daniel stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. Thank you, Lily, he said softly, his own voice thick with emotion. You've spoken God's truth today. The congregation sat in stunned silence, many faces streaked with tears. Some nodded slowly, as if seeing Jack, really seeing him, for the first time. Others bowed their heads, perhaps in prayer, perhaps in shame. Jack's vision blurred as he watched his daughter, his brave, beautiful girl, standing tall in her yellow dress. In that moment, his heart shattered and mended all at once, broken by the weight of what she carried, and healed by the pure love she offered to the world. Through his tears, he saw her, really saw her, not just as his little girl, but as a mirror of her mother's strength and his own resilience. In her small frame stood all the dignity and courage he'd thought he'd lost. The silence in the church held a weight of its own, heavy with recognition and regret, but also with the possibility of change. Jack felt it all, the breaking and the healing, the end of something and the beginning of something else, all contained in the truth spoken by a child's heart. Jack watched in stunned silence as his little girl's words echoed through the church. Lily stood there in her yellow dress, hands clasped tightly in front of her, looking so small yet so brave. Her chin quivered, but her voice stayed strong. Mrs. Peterson, who had always hurried past them at the grocery store, was the first to stand. Tears streamed down her weathered face. That child is right, she declared, her voice breaking. What have we become? One by one, others rose. Mr. Thompson, the hardware store owner who had never quite met Jack's eyes, cleared his throat. My father fought in Vietnam, came home to people spitting on him. I swore I'd never treat a veteran that way, but here I am, doing worse. I'm sorry, Jack. I'm so sorry. Grace stood next to Jack, her hand gentle on his shoulder. We can't change the past, she said, addressing the congregation. But we can choose what happens next. The pastor nodded solemnly. The question isn't just what would Jesus do, he said. It's what will we do, right here, right now. Billy Cooper, the high school football coach, raised his hand. I've got paint and supplies in my garage. That diner needs fixing up, and I aim to help. I can bring food for the workers, called out Mrs. Martinez from the choir. My boys and I will help paint, another voice added. The momentum built like a wave. People who had never spoken to Jack were suddenly making plans, organizing teams, sharing phone numbers. Lily ran back to Jack's arms, burying her face in his chest. He held her close, his heart too full for words. After the service, the church parking lot buzzed with activity. Mr. Harris arrived, his eyes wide at the crowd gathering. Jack, he said, gripping Jack's hand. This is what I've been trying to tell you. This town has good people. They just needed a wake-up call. Within hours, a convoy of trucks and cars headed to the diner. Jack drove behind them, Lily bouncing excitedly in her car seat.
See, Daddy? They're helping. Just like you always help people.
The sight at the diner nearly brought Jack to his knees. At least 30 people had shown up, armed with paint rollers, scrub brushes, and determination. The hateful graffiti was already being scrubbed away by teenagers in church clothes, their parents working alongside them. Coach Cooper directed teams like he was running football practice. "Johnson family, take the west wall. Martinez crew, you've got the front. Remember 2 coats, people." Women set up folding tables with sandwiches, cookies, and giant coolers of lemonade. Mrs. Peterson approached Jack with a plate. "You need to keep your strength up," she insisted. "Can't have our veterans program leader getting weak on us." Jack started to protest that he hadn't agreed to keep leading anything, but Grace appeared at his side. "Don't you dare think about quitting now," she said firmly. "These people need you, not just as a symbol, but as a leader who understands sacrifice and service." Lily tugged at his hand. "Look, Daddy, Tommy's dad is teaching me how to paint." She pointed to where Mr. Haver Thompson was showing her how to use a small roller, carefully keeping the paint off her dress. The afternoon sun beat down, but nobody complained. People Jack had only known as distant faces became real humans with names, stories, and genuine smiles. Mrs. Martinez told him about her son in the Marines. Coach Cooper shared memories of his veteran father. Even old Mr. Jenkins, who had once crossed the street to avoid Jack, worked steadily beside him, sharing quiet stories of his own military service. The diner's walls transformed. Fresh paint covered the hate, replaced by clean, bright colors. Someone had the idea to add a mural of the American flag, and an art teacher from the high school sketched it out. Veterans and civilians worked side by side to fill in the stars and stripes. Mr. Harris watched it all with tears in his eyes. "This is what community looks like," he said, standing beside Jack. "This is what happens when people choose love over fear." A local reporter showed up, taking photos and interviews. Jack tried to stay in the background, but people kept pulling him forward, insisting he was part of the story. "The real story," he finally told the reporter, "is about a town remembering who they really are." As the afternoon wore on, Jack found himself standing back, watching the scene unfold. Children ran between adults, carrying water bottles and paintbrushes. Teenagers who usually spent Sundays on their phones were instead up on ladders, concentrating on their painting. Elder church members sat in lawn chairs, offering encouragement and sharing stories. The hate that had seemed so overwhelming just days ago was being erased not just with paint, but with every laugh, every shared sandwich, every moment of connection. Jack watched as Lily flitted from group to group, her yellow dress now spotted with paint despite Mr. Thompson's best efforts, her smile bright enough to light up the darkest corners. Grace joined him, wiping paint from her hands. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes it takes a child to remind us of what matters." "Lily showed us our own hearts today." Jack nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. The diner that had once been a place of humiliation, then hope, then hatred, was being transformed again. But this time, it wasn't just the building changing. The heart of the town was changing too. One paint stroke at a time. He watched as strangers became friends, as barriers fell away under the simple act of working together. The wounds weren't all healed. He knew that, but something fundamental had shifted. His daughter's brave words had cracked open the shell of indifference and prejudice, letting light pour in. Standing there in the late afternoon sun, Jack felt hope rising in his chest like a tide. Not the fragile hope of before, but something stronger, built on the foundation of community and shared purpose. He looked at the people around him, his people now, his town, and for the first time in years, he felt truly at home. Officer Martinez shifted uncomfortably in his chair at the diner's corner booth, his coffee untouched. Jack sat across from him, while Mr. Harris stood nearby, his arms crossed. The morning sun filtered through the newly cleaned windows, highlighting the fresh paint that covered where the hateful words had been. "They're just kids, Mr. Turner," Officer Martinez said, his voice heavy. 17 and 18, the Reynolds boy and the Davidson twins. Jack's hands tightened around his coffee cup. He knew those families, had served their older siblings at the diner, watched their parents at church. Their parents? Shocked, ashamed, Officer Martinez shook his head. "Seems they picked up some ugly ideas at home, though. Things said at dinner tables, prejudices passed down like family recipes." Mr. Harris made a sound of disgust. "They need to face consequences. This kind of hate crime—" "Wait," Jack interrupted softly. He thought of Lily's words at church, of her pure heart asking for understanding. What if? What if there's another way? Both men looked at him questioningly. Instead of pressing charges, Jack continued, "What if they worked here? At the diner? Alongside me, alongside the veterans who come in. Get to know us as people, not stereotypes." Officer Martinez leaned forward. "Community service instead of prosecution? That's unusually merciful, Mr. Turner." "Mercy changed me once," Jack said quietly, remembering his darkest days after losing his wife. "Sometimes people just need to see humanity in those they've been taught to fear." Word spread quickly in their small town. By afternoon, a crowd had gathered outside the diner. The three boys stood with their parents, heads bowed, as Jack addressed them all. "Hate is taught," he said, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "But so is love. These young men will work here for the next 6 months. They'll serve meals to veterans, to families of all backgrounds, to everyone who comes through those doors. And maybe, just maybe, they'll learn what I learned in the Rangers. That character isn't about color or background. It's about heart." Mrs. Reynolds broke into tears, rushing forward to grasp Jack's hands. "Thank you," she whispered. "We failed as parents, but you're giving them a chance to be better." The crowd murmured approval. Pastor William stepped forward, nodding firmly. "This is what healing looks like," he announced. "This is how we build bridges instead of walls." Inside the diner, Jack showed the boys around. Their hands shook as they tied on aprons, but he spoke to them with calm patience. "First lesson: every person who walks through that door deserves respect. We serve them all with dignity." Mr. Harris watched from behind the counter, his initial anger softening as he saw Jack's gentle guidance. The boys' tense shoulders gradually relaxed as they realized they weren't facing scorn, but an opportunity to make amends. Throughout the afternoon, regulars began returning to the diner. Old Mrs. Jenkins brought her famous apple pie. The Cooper family came with their 4 kids, filling a booth with laughter. Veterans from Jack's support group stopped by, some in wheelchairs, others with service dogs, all greeting the nervous boys with firm handshakes and steady gazes. Grace arrived as the dinner rush began. She watched Jack showing one of the Davidson twins how to properly set a table, his movements precise and patient. When their eyes met across the room, she smiled. That warm, understanding smile that had first drawn him to her. "The whole town's talking about what you did," she said, approaching him as he finished with the table settings. "They're calling it a miracle." Jack shook his head. "Not a miracle, just faith in people's capacity to change, to grow." They watched together as the Reynolds boy carefully served coffee to an elderly black couple, his "yes, sir," and "thank you, ma'am," earnest and respectful. The couple nodded approvingly, and the boy's face lit up with the first real smile they'd seen from him. "You're teaching them more than service," Grace observed softly. "You're teaching them grace." The diner hummed with activity, dishes clinking, conversations flowing, the smell of fresh coffee and baking bread filling the air. It felt alive again, vibrant with possibility. Jack looked around at the mixed crowd, young and old, veterans and civilians, faces of every shade, all sharing meals and stories under one roof. Grace's hand found his, warm and steady. She didn't say anything, but her presence spoke volumes. Jack felt something settle in his chest, a peace he hadn't known he was missing. This wasn't just about surviving anymore, about enduring sideways glances and whispered judgments. This was about building something new, something better. The Davidson twins were laughing with a table of Marines, eager to hear their stories. The Reynolds boy was carefully writing down an order from a young mixed-race family, his earlier awkwardness replaced by genuine courtesy. And through the window, Jack could see Lily playing hopscotch with other children on the sidewalk, their happy shouts carrying through the glass. This was what belonging felt like. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of understanding. Not the denial of differences, but the celebration of common ground. As the diner buzzed with renewed life around them, Jack squeezed Grace's hand, anchoring himself in this moment of quiet triumph. Mr. Harris approached, beaming with pride. "We're going to need more coffee cups," he announced. "Haven't seen the place this full in years." Jack nodded, still holding Grace's hand. The diner wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It had become a symbol of what their town could be. A place where mercy overcame hatred, where understanding bridged divides, where second chances led to real change. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, painting everything in warm gold. Jack watched as one of the young men stopped to help an elderly veteran with his coat, the simple gesture speaking volumes about transformation. This was how healing happened, not in grand gestures, but in small acts of kindness, repeated day after day until they became natural as breathing. Around them, the diner continued its gentle symphony of clinking plates and murmured conversations, of laughter and life and second chances. Grace's hand remained in his, a quiet promise of support, of partnership, of a future built on forgiveness and hope. The autumn evening painted golden streaks across the diner's windows as the sun began to set. Inside, the warmth of community filled every corner. The jukebox played an old country song, its melody wrapping around conversations and laughter like a comfortable blanket. Jack stood by the counter, his work apron still on, watching the scene before him with quiet amazement. Veterans gathered at their usual corner tables, sharing stories over steaming cups of coffee. Families occupied the booths, children coloring on paper placemats while parents chatted. Even the teenagers who had once vandalized the diner now helped bus tables, their faces showing a new understanding of service. Mr. Harris worked the grill, his experienced hands moving with practiced ease as he called out orders. The sizzle of burgers and the clinking of plates created a homey symphony that Jack had grown to love. The old man caught his eye and gave him a knowing wink. "Daddy!" Lily's voice cut through the din as she bounced toward him, her Sunday dress swishing around her knees. "Can we dance? Please?" Her eyes sparkled with the pure joy only a child could possess. Jack felt his heart swell. Gone was the fear in her eyes from those dark days after the vandalism. Now she moved through the diner like she owned it, greeting everyone by name, her smile infectious. "Well, how can I say no to that?" Jack untied his apron and hung it on its hook. He took Lily's small hand in his and led her to the open space between tables. Someone changed the music. The first notes of "What a Wonderful World" filled the air. Jack lifted Lily onto his feet, just like he used to do with her mother. They swayed together, father and daughter, as the other diners began to notice. "Remember how Mommy taught us?" Lily asked, looking up at him with those bright eyes that held both her mother's spirit and her own unique light. "I sure do, Princess." Jack twirled them slowly, careful not to bump into nearby tables. "She always said dancing was like flying with your feet on the ground." The other customers started clapping in rhythm to the music. Jack noticed Grace watching from behind the counter, her eyes glistening with tears even as she smiled. She'd been his anchor through the worst storms, never pushing, just being there with her quiet strength. More couples joined them on the makeshift dance floor. Mr. Harris led his wife of 40 years in a gentle waltz. Even some of the veterans got up, partnering with their grandchildren or each other, letting the music heal old wounds. Through the window, Jack could see people stopping on the sidewalk outside, drawn by the scene within. Where once there had been suspicious glances, now there were warm smiles. The diner glowed like a lighthouse in the growing dusk, beckoning everyone inside. Lily giggled as Jack dipped her carefully. "Daddy, look! Everyone's dancing." He did look, taking in the scene that would have seemed impossible just months ago. The elderly couple who'd once whispered about outsiders now shared their table with a young veteran and his family. The town council member who'd been skeptical of Jack's presence was teaching his grandson to do the twist. The music shifted to something slower, and Lily wrapped her arms around Jack's neck, resting her head on his shoulder. In that moment, he felt the weight of their journey, all the pain, the fear, the uncertainty, lift away like morning mist. Grace approached them, carrying a fresh piece of apple pie topped with ice cream. "I thought you two might need a break," she said, setting it on a nearby table. Her hand brushed Jack's arm, a touch so gentle, yet full of promise. Lily's eyes lit up at the sight of dessert, but she didn't let go of her father. "Just one more song?" she pleaded. "One more," Jack agreed, continuing their slow dance. The setting sun caught in the diner's windows, filling the room with warm light that seemed to make everything glow. He could see their reflection in the glass, father and daughter moving in perfect sync, surrounded by the community that had become their family. Mr. Harris called out from behind the counter, "Hey, Jack, remember when you first walked in here? Look at us now." Laughter and agreeing murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jack remembered that day clearly, the exhaustion, the hurt, the quiet dignity he'd tried to maintain for Lily's sake. How different things were now. As they turned slowly in their dance, Jack caught glimpses of all the changes their presence had brought. The veteran support group flyers on the bulletin board, the children's artwork decorating the walls, the mix of faces that now filled the seats. The diner had transformed from a place of tension to a hub of healing. Lily looked up at him, her face serious for a moment. "Are we staying forever, Daddy?" Jack pulled her closer, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his. The answer came naturally, rising from a place of absolute certainty. He leaned down and whispered in her ear, "We belong here." Grace wiped a tear from her cheek as she watched them, her smile radiant with joy and something more, something that spoke of future possibilities and shared dreams. Outside, the last rays of sunlight caught the newly painted walls of the diner, making them shine. Inside, the warm glow of acceptance and love filled every corner, every heart. The music played on, a soundtrack to their healing, their hope, their home. Their pies sat waiting, ice cream melting slowly, but neither Jack nor Lily moved to end their dance. This moment was too precious, too perfect to rush. They swayed together, father and daughter, in the heart of their community, finally and truly home. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Jack Turner, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.